So we're back for another episode of Percussion Discussion, and we're going stateside this time, and I'm absolutely thrilled to have what I can only describe as a chameleon of a drummer. Fits in any situation. We've got Mr. Jason Sutter with us. So Jason, thanks for doing this, mate. This is really cool of you.
Right on, man. Pleasure to be here.
And you're sat outside at the moment. It's just starting to snow here in Wales, and you're sat outside.
Yeah, it's yeah. As we were saying before, I definitely don't take it for granted. You know, it's pretty remarkable that we're in the first week of December and I had coffee right over here outside, at 7 a.m, just sitting outside while the sun kind of, came out. So, now it's warm and sunny and beautiful. And so, yeah, I don't take any of that for granted, being an original New Yorker, growing up in the tundra. So yeah, I'm lucky.
So you're used to the cold. Being a New Yorker, obviously, yeah.
You bet. But now, no way, man. No thanks. I'm spoiled, yeah.
Why not? Hey, well, look, thanks for doing it. I appreciate it. Let's start back at the beginning. Where did your drum journey begin for you?
For me, I guess I was super drawn to drums when I was really little. And, luckily my father was a drum enthusiast. He's a sculptor, and a professor of fine art. So, for him, when I got interested, he got really into it. And luckily, very luckily, I was at a college where there was a great music department, Crane School of Music, State University of New York in Potsdam, which is way upstate New York near Canada. Anyway, speaking of cold. And so basically, sorry, we'll get some planes,
okay.
LA. So if you have a problem, let me know. But anyway, the professor of the drum department at Crane School of Music was this amazing guy named Jim Peterzak. And Jim Peterzak still teaches there, which is incredible. And Jim taught a very young Dave Weckl. And Jim was my drum teacher. And the way that worked, which is kind of wild but cool, is they basically took my dad traded Peterzak a drawing, a big, giant, grand drawing for drum lessons. And so,
amazing.
My early tutelage, with one of the best teachers out there, still one of the top, and, still super active in PASIC, and, the Percussive Art Society, still, incredible educator and pretty amazing dude. We stay in touch, and I talk to him still, at these events, different drum events where he's present. But I basically got incredible tutelage from this incredible teacher that just happened to be in my town. And so the transaction's kind of surreal, but I got great lessons with Peterzak. He recommended, as I studied with him for years, to other graduate students to get other other focuses in different percussive areas that he was able to kind of, work around with me, which was really beneficial. And he also really encouraged me to go to University of North Texas for undergrad, which was a great play. And so it was amazing to get to be around him. He would bring in guys like Ed Sof, who I study with. He'd bring in Ed Thigpen, he'd bring in Adam Nussbaum, all these great jazz dudes who'd come up, do clinics, hang out, with Peterzak and kick it. And so, I got my first brush lessons from Ed Thigpen, and, to get that experience thanks to him, and made this connection with someone like Ed Sof. So when I got to North Texas and Ed had just started there, Peterzak was able to connect the dots and say, hey, will you teach this kid? And he did. It was really amazing. So, but the best of all was just the hands. I got great lessons at an early age. Nothing slid, and that just spiraled. And then, when I got into high school, I was starting to play bars when I was like 13, and with older people, and my parents would have to come and chaperone. And then eventually they didn't have to chaperone anymore. I'm like 15, I'm playing more bars, and then there was a whole college circuit of getting to play all these gigs for college events or parties or big sororities or fraternity houses. And so I'm literally like, I've got a pop band, I've got a college band playing all these college events where I'm, learning all this progressive, newer stuff, like at the time, like, Joe Jackson and Missing Persons, and getting to play all that shit with Simmons. And I have, Rototoms and Pro Sound, and we bought a truck and a light show. And then I have like 4 gigs going. I'm like basically like a session dude while still in high school. And I wouldn't have gotten that experience if I grew up in, say, a big city like Atlanta or LA or Dallas, because I happened to be like a little small, kind of a big fish in a small pond.
Yeah.
Even though I was young, I was playing so much that I got better quicker. So by the time I got to college, I really already had like 7 or 8 years of like playing professionally, like signing contracts, negotiating deals at high schools. I'm like 16 playing with like 35-year-olds, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Or I'm a senior in high school playing with seniors in college, and they were taking it very seriously. So I learned, that level of, musicianship and quality performances at a super young age. So it's just beyond, it's funny. I was having a talk in Vegas. I was playing, with Cher, and Kenny Aronoff we're staying in the same cool hotel where a lot of rock bands stay. And Kenny was playing with John Fogerty. We ran into each other. He's like, dude, let's get a drink at the bar. Let's hang. And unfortunately, the Vegas, when you play these nights, they're usually everyone plays the same 3 nights. Okay. So I could never see him. He could never see me, which is a bummer, but the beauty is, we could hang, and, me and Kenny could hang, and it was really fun. We've hung a bunch, and I've known Kenny for years. I see him at the Trader Joe's grocery store, it's hilarious, but it was interesting because we were just talking about drums and life and working in Vegas, and we got on the topic of talking about percussion and timpani and playing marimba and, playing a xylophone part in an orchestra. And afterwards we finished, he said, I got to be honest. He's like, I've never had this conversation with a rock drummer before, ever. He's like, I've never been able to have that conversation with another guy who does what I do, hits hard and plays rock stuff, but also has that background of like working with a conductor. And we were like, going down the rabbit hole, and it was really fun. First gig I got, which was out of grad school, which began this whole crazy touring thing, was a girl named Juliana Hatfield, who was a big deal in the 90s. And I got the gig because I came home for Christmas and was out at a bar in my little town in upstate New York, and a guitarist who now was signed to a band called a label, and was in a band called the Gigolo Ants, one of the many post-Nirvana signings, like everybody got a record deal. And so he was living, and they were working in Boston, and he had come home, and he said, listen, man, I got a gig for you. And I was in my last year of graduate work, would have started. And he said, I said, well, why would you recommend me? He's like, dude, because you play just like this guy who everybody wants to hire in Boston. And this girl, Juliana Hatfield, and another girl, Tracy Bonham at the time, both are looking for a drummer. And he's like, and you play just like him. I'm like, how do you know how I play? You haven't seen me play in like 7 years, 8 years. I've been in college, undergrad for 4, and graduate school for 2, for 5 and 2. He said, oh no, I saw you play at that beer blast at the fraternity when you were, and he recommended me based on how he saw me play when I was a senior in high school. So just, and this is pre-YouTube and all that shit. So it just goes to show, like, you never know when or what someone sees and how that's going to come back around. And so he recommended me. I flew up there. I hadn't been playing drum set at all. Yeah. I've been playing drum set, but jazz, like, burning and sight reading, and not, a little bit of fusion and, a lot of brushes with small groups, but no rock stuff in years, even though that was the goal. The goal was to get out of college and do that. Yeah. I just knew that I wanted to get all this other stuff happening while I was here, because I could do that again outside of this, And I got the job, and I got the gig. And the drummer, which ironically is one of my dearest friends, that he was talking about, is a guy named Stacy Jones. And Stacy Jones has been Miley Cyrus's music director and drummer for the last 10, 12 years. Yes. Not to mention tours with Matchbox 20, and is one of the biggest producers. And he's a big music director in LA now. And Jones was that drummer. He was saying, you play just like him. And if you went up there and they heard you, you'd get the gig, because everybody wants him to play in their band. And I listened to the record, and I went, I play just like this dude. And when we met, literally in the first hour of meeting, it was like we were like, we have so much in common, and in so many ways. And he's still, to this day, one of my greatest friends, and easily one of the best drummers. If you ever hear Stacy, it's like John Bonham meets Jeff Porcaro, just ferocious. But anyway, so it's just kind of funny that we're both still in the game, and he was that drummer. But if that sums up my upbringing, was really important in this little tiny town by this dude who turned into a catalyst. Ironically, this is bizarre. I hope I'm not, I don't know, going off here on this, but to connect the dots, Dave, his name's Dave Gibbs, plays bass with Tom Morello and all his Street Sweeper from Rage Against the Machine, all his gigs. And then Dave and I one of the first sessions I did here was for the soundtrack for Josie and the Pussycats, with Babyface producing.
Yeah.
You know, it's a kind of a cult favorite movie, but I'm the drums on all that. Tara Reid, the actress, plays, but we did that together, and it was a big deal. Got a gold record. You know, it was great. I just moved here to LA, and Dave was one of the only people I knew. So years later, my connection with Dave still happening. And in 2004, I just come off the road with American Hi-Fi, my first kind of big touring gig. Did a lot in England, Wales, Cardiff, played Cardiff for sure. And Dave said, I've got this musical I'm working on. I want you to come in with me, and we'll, just like Josie, it'll just be you and me, and I'll play guitar and you play drums, and we're going to put this together. And I said, okay. And he said, it's going to be a bunch of old songs, like we'll take a Asia, and we're going to mash it with, you know, a Blondie tune, and we're going to mash that with a Journey song, and it's going to be this musical. It's going to be great. Anyway, that turned out to be Rock of Ages, the musical.
Oh, right.
And we literally wrote that music together, me and Dave in a room.
Yeah.
Tracked it, you know, from section to section, put it together. A studio right down the street from me called Studio City Sound, and we drive it over to Debbie Reynolds' dance, and they play it for the dancers, and the dancers would learn the moves. And we did an hour preview a couple months later where we were playing it for about a month. We did probably 20 shows for producers to come in and see it, but you buy tickets. It was only an hour, and then that picked up, and they literally 3 or 4 months later, we're doing a full 2-act production of a full musical for LA, where it's sold out, you know, partying, drinks, you know, rock stars are coming. It's a huge deal. And then it goes to Vegas shortly after. I ended up getting the gig with Smashmouth and splitting at the very end. I missed the last 2 weeks. Yeah. Goes to off-Broadway, does okay, then hits Broadway and becomes one of the biggest musicals ever.
Cool.
Yeah.
And a film made of it as well, a movie made of it.
Yeah, absolutely. It was a movie, not great, but a movie. And to this day, I remember being in London. I was on tour with the New York Dolls. And I remember being in London, and we're opening for Alice Cooper at Alley Pally in London for a Halloween show. Super cool. I go, where did I go? I think I went to see George Michael play at the, with an orchestra. I knew his manager, Michael Littman, and he was playing one of these crazy sold out shows at Royal Albert Hall, which I'd never been to, which was just
amazing.
Absolutely as impressive as the show. And as you can imagine, the show was amazing with an orchestra, and one of the last tours he ever did, I think. And so I went and saw that. I'm on the train coming back to my hotel, and I'm looking around, and everybody on the train has Rock of Ages bags from the production, you know, in the theater. And it was just so surreal to me to look, and they're literally just got everyone on the train is coming from, you know, and it was just like, holy shit.
You know, a little earlier you mentioned the New York Dolls. Now, how many, that must have been great fun. How many of the originals? Was there any of the originals still in it?
Two, yeah. David Johansen and Sylvain. Wow, amazing. And then the rest of the band was all A-list New York famous session dudes. One is Earl Slick from David Bowie. Took the place of Johnny Thunders, and then a great bass player, Kenny Aronson, who's played with everybody from Bob Dylan to Billy Idol back in the day, who was in the original band Stories, you know, did Louie, the little Louie. So, you know, that dude, it was just like, you know, and I was like the baby in the band, and it was an incredible experience. And we, you know, my great friend Brian Delaney, who went to North Texas, ended up getting the gig because he was doing jazz lounge stuff with Dave. And then the Dolls picked up again. He was like, do you want to play drums? He was like, sure. And so they ended up he played with them for years, and they're one of my huge all-time favorite bands. And so I would go see them whenever they came through town. I was there. I'd hang out beginning to end, hang out backstage, met the dudes. I'm just like huge fan. So when Brian's wife was pregnant, he was going to have a baby. They were going to have a baby. He couldn't do the tour. And it turned out to be one of their final tour. And it turned out to be the biggest thing they ever did, which was Motley Crue, Poison, New York Dolls. And we toured all over America for 3 months of outdoor sold out sheds. It was one of the coolest things. And when that ended, Brian came back for a second, and then he had pre-booked something else he had to do in Japan. So when they got called to do this Alice Cooper, it's like a 3-week tour of Halloween tour of the UK, and we ended in Glasgow on Halloween night, and you know, 3 shows in London. I think it was just amazing. And so to get to tour with Alice Cooper, those guys who were you know, all great friends of mine, all those people. With the New York Dolls, just the history of all that, with Motley Crue and Poison never toured together. And obviously there would be no Motley Crue and there would be no Poison if it were not for New York Dolls. And that was very clear. And the respect level was really cool. And just to, I'm with, David Johansen, every word out of his mouth is a soundbite. Every word is it's like a prophet, and so they were the coolest guys. They treated me like I was like one of the gang. I got like a nickname. My nickname was Hollywood. Like, hey, Hollywood, like I was like part of the gang. So
brilliant.
They were super respectful and treated me like I was a doll from the beginning. And it was, makes it easy when people say, what's one of the coolest gigs you've ever done? It's like, got that covered, So yeah, it was a dream. And I think I did the final tour. The which?
Do you have a favorite Dolls song to play?
What was it, man? God, there's one that's so crazy that I loved. It literally, I'm spacing it. I mean, obviously, like Mystery Girls was always super fun, but there's
crisis stuff. Yeah.
Yeah, there's one tune I can't think of right now, and it's just like super bizarre, and it like the tempo's slow down and it speeds. It's just like I'm spacing it. But anyway, that was my favorite tune to play. But it was just everything. It was just bliss playing that show with Earl Slick and Kenny were just A-list badasses, and both kind of session guys. So for me to kind of get a lot of experience from those guys and what it takes to do this for that long, and I was easily 20 years younger than the youngest guy. So just stupid, so cool. And I know they'll probably never play another gig, that's it. So, cool to kind of be there, catch the tail end of that,
history, isn't it? It's
incredible. Yeah. Incredible. There would be, without those guys, there wouldn't be, half the bands that we love, there just wouldn't be,
Your career is incredible. I'm jumping about a little bit, and I apologize about that. Obviously, if we had 24 hours, I think we could maybe cover some of it, a big part of it. But I'm going to mention one of the most iconic voices in music, Chris Cornell, the late Chris Cornell. What was that like? Again, how could you? There's no words that could describe it. It was at a cool time. I was coming off the Rock of Ages, then Smashmouth I'd been playing with for a year, played on a record with those guys. They were still really kind of relevant at the time. And it was like, I was just kind of getting going, like the career was really, I was starting to become a session guy. This is happening, exactly what I wanted, to be able to do a bunch of shit. To be fair, I'm really I am the luckiest dude in the world, but I will say what I do is exactly what I wanted to do. Yeah. I never wanted to be the drummer in Linkin Park. Yeah. Well, that'd be great. I didn't want to be in one gig. I didn't want to just, I just wanted to be able to play a bunch of different styles and be able to, and that's why that college experience when I was letting I thought all that would help. And I think it has, learning all the other mediums and disciplines and percussion, Yeah. Learning how to learn, you learn how to learn when you go from, okay, I play drum set. How did I learn that? Now I have to apply that to timpani. Now I have to apply that to marimba. Now I have to apply that to learning 30 songs in 2 days. Those kind of things, those disciplines where you learn by kind of pushing yourself out of a comfort zone, which I did. So the Cornell thing was just the beginning of this incredible time, and the whole band we were all kind of reaching this kind of just getting this elevation. And he had auditioned 20, 30 guys for each spot, so he was very diligent. It was like a month and a half, how auditions took forever. I remember talking to a buddy of mine who was auditioning for him, and I was perfectly comfortable with my Smashmouth gig, and it was like, this is cool. I'm a session guy, I'm making good money. They treat me, I'm getting treated well. I'm playing on the record. I'm good. Cool. Chris Cornell though. Cool. My friends were all auditioning, and then Barry Squire, the head, kind of casting agent, I guess you'd call it, booking agent, called me one night. He said, hey man, what are you doing? Could you come in and audition for Chris Cornell tomorrow? I said, he said, I know you got the Smashmouth gig and I know you're happy with it. You don't have to take this gig. He said, it would help. It would make me look good because I've had 25 guys come out and he doesn't love any of them. They're not the right guy. He's like, I know you'll be the right guy. So at least I can say I brought you the right guy. And I'm like, will Chris be there? Will I actually get to play with him? And he said, yeah. I said, well, that's worth it alone. Yeah. But this is at 6 at night.
And it wasn't until like 8 o'clock that I got in a practice room, and I had to learn 5 tunes. And, you know, 2 of them were, one was Black Hole Sun and one was maybe Black Days. So, you know, those 2 alone are like, that's just so much to learn.
Yeah.
And so anyway, it was a bitch to learn that shit in you know, in that little time. But luckily I got in and Chris hadn't been there. He was delayed from some press thing that ended up lasting like hours. So we had hours to run through the stuff. And it was 2 guitarists, 2 bass players, and me. And I got the gig, you know, as I was driving home, you know, I got a call, like as soon as we were done, the rehearsal place is Center Staging, which is literally like 3-4 miles that way.
Yeah.
You know, I'm in North Hollywood. It's like right there. And literally as I'm driving home, I recommended a buddy of mine who had the Smashmouth gig before, Mitch Marine, who plays with Dwight Yoakam.
Yep.
He was looking for a gig because Dwight was done. And I said, well, dude, I'm not going to take this gig. Chris Cornell's auditioning drummers. You should audition for Chris Cornell. I said, just wait till I audition first so it's not weird. And then call Barry Squire. I should be done around 4 or whatever, right? So as I'm driving home, Mitch calls me and he goes, dude, I just called Barry Squire. He said, you got hired. I was like, what do you mean? He's like, I was like, I just left there. He's like, I called Barry to say, hey, Sutter told me to call about audition. He's like, yeah. He said Cornell just walked up to him and said, hire the drummer.
Wow.
So it was like I found out from Mitch literally as I'm driving home. So eventually it did work out, and I did that gig, and Mitch went back to Smashmouth, who had recommended me for them. So it pretty funny story. But yeah, I don't know how you put it into words. It was just incredible. I will say, at the beginning, all these great players, you know, the guys in the band were all similar age and at the same point in their career where this was really, it was the, you know, release of YouTube had just come out. So we were just like everywhere, you know. It was great to get that exposure and to be behind such a, you know, be able to play this such incredible music behind such an icon. And we played everything. I mean, by the end, you know, we played everything off the solo records. We played everything off all the Soundgarden records, even the rarest, you know, B-sides. He had us learn, you know, Chris just he just loved it. We could, you know, we could learn it quickly. So we did all the Audio Slave stuff. I mean, you name it. Rare B-sides for soundtracks, we learned it. So the point where at one point, you know, if somebody in the crowd after the first year would yell a song, he'd just look at us and go, all right, let's do it. And we could probably do it, you know. I would keep, every time he had a new song, I would put it on a piece of paper with a tempo, because, you know, at least I could get that much right if I didn't know it. And because every week, probably at least every month, we would learn 2 or 3 tunes, and at least, if not every week for a while. I mean, not unreasonable, but, you know, these are major, you know, compositions. And so by the end, I think I had something like 85 tunes on a set list that we had learned, you know, that we were supposed to be ready to play at any time. So kind of wild.
They were all, it was just random on the night. It would be,
he could just, well, he would give us a set list, but, you know, there were tunes that like he could just pull out and say, let's play this tune. We maybe played it once, you know, in South America 2 years ago, you know, and it was like we and I think we pulled it off, you know. We never really botched anything major. And, you know, but I will say also, which is really exceptional and very unusual being in my field, is when we first got together after the audition process, we rehearsed for like a week, you know, every day, learning material, you know, gearing up. And I remember Chris, before our first performance, just pulling us aside and saying, you know, I hired you guys for a reason. There are no wrong notes. Don't second guess anything you feel like playing. You know, just spread your wings and go, you know. And honestly, that never happens.
No.
You know what I mean? It just never happens. You just don't get that kind of carte blanche. So that's, once you have that environment, you know, freedom like that from someone as iconic as him, it just raises the bar where you just go for shit you would never go for. And man, you can hear it on any bootlegs or videos. It's like, we're just going for it. And he loved it, you know. So it was that trust that coming from someone like him, who's earned it, you know, was just, and I have never had that freedom or that feeling where I could just do whatever I wanted and it would be okay, you know? And of course he knew he had vetted everyone well enough to know we're not going to try to go out and showboat or be ridiculous. You know, it's like, let's make music. Let's do this. It was amazing, you know? And he's the coolest guy, you know. I feel like I got to see him. I mean, I will say, which is pretty heavy, knowing him from those 3 years of playing with him, I feel like I'm probably one of like maybe 100 people who actually know him.
Really?
You know, because unless you get that close, when you see him at a meet and greet, that's a different guy. When you see him at a public, it's a different guy. I could be wrong, but I feel pretty confident that like I am one of the few from that experience of being, you know, with him so intimately that I, you know, he's a pretty quiet dude, and you don't really see the real dude until you're, you know, around him. So yeah, it was so that alone was just, you know, it was incredible honor to get to know him and his family and everybody. It was just incredible, really great, you know, and the music stands on its own, and to be associated with him at all is, of course, you know, he's a legend. He's the Jim Morrison of our time. You know, he's, yeah, I see his face spray painted on, stenciled on signs everywhere. And it's like, I know that dude. That's my dude. You know what I mean? It's like Jim Morrison was throughout the 70s and 80s. You know, he is that icon.
Iconic. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
You know, and then,
So,
yeah, I've written some names down. Oh, I just write a few little. I don't normally write much down, but and of course we'll have to talk about Marilyn. Marilyn.
yeah, sure.
How did that come about? I mean, that's such a jump about in music again, isn't it? You know, it's one extreme.
I guess, I mean, you know, for me, it's like, yeah, I wanted to do that too. I wanted to do the metal thing. You know, I want to be able to live, you know, every one of those worlds. You know, why wouldn't you if you could? You know, it's like, and I do believe as drummers or musicians in general, there's an arc. You know, you have an arc. There are a bunch of little arcs in those arcs, but there's a big arc of a career, and you have only so much time to do those things. Yeah. You know, and that the metal era thing for me was like, you know, it was a perfect time in my life where, you know, I wasn't like, now I don't know that I'd want to do that. You know, even though that was only 8 years ago, 7 years ago, I don't think I'd want to go out and be in like the metal touring band playing in the loud, you know, I'm just like, I did that, and I was at an age where it was really fun. You know, I don't know if I'd want to deal with that right now, but, yeah, it was crazy. It just goes to show, like, it's planting that seed, you know, like when I played with Joe Perry 2 years ago, I think, with Brad Whitford, and did all this whole tour of all Aerosmith stuff and his new record. And, you know, somebody said, like, dude, how did you get, you know, when did you get that gig? And I said, well, I mean, the fair answer was the audition probably the you know, started 15 or like 12 years ago, you know, when we were opening for Aerosmith with Cornell. And he saw me play and remarked to a photographer, a mutual friend of ours, oh, I think, you know, he's like, how cool is it that you're on tour with Cornell? He said, yeah, it's great. And I think I found my drummer for my next Joe Perry project. And he told me that. And that's where the seed was planted. That was, you know, I don't know, that would be 13 years ago. And then we finally get to play like a couple of years ago. So sometimes the germination period can be a lot longer than people think, you know, like how these gigs come around. And that gig was, you know, was a weird one, but it came about from a member in his band. We played, who was playing with Manson, and when we did the Download Festival years ago with Cornell, headlining a side stage, Anvil was headlining the smallest stage, which was amazing. We got to race over and see those guys. That movie had just come out, so yeah, it was pretty damn cool. But the guitarist at the time said, we were hanging out. I said, hey, dude, if this gig ever opens up, man, I'd love to do it. Cool. You know, it's his birthday. We're drinking some whiskey after. And I just said that. And he said, okay, cool, man. Because we had done another tour when he was in a band with Billy Howardale called Ashes Divide with Jeff Friedel, great drummer. That was his first kind of big gig. We had done a tour with Linkin Park. And so we got to know each other in that. Here I am with Cornell now in England, and I just dropped that. I just say, hey, you got to put it out there. You know, I say that to young guys, like, you don't want to be like selling yourself or begging for a gig, but if you don't say it, then, you know, I mean, that seed hasn't been planted. And you got there's a right way and a wrong way, and there's a right time, and that was the right time. So I just said it. I ended up doing the Foreigner gig right after Cornell, and when I was out with Foreigner, there was this, you know, that was Foreigner Sticks, Kansas, right? Which is amazing. But again, I'm like a baby of that group of dudes. Everybody's, you know, at least 10 years older than me. So there was a younger girl in production who had worked with Manson before as a production assistant. And she was going to go back as possibly the tour manager. But you know, Manson at the time would do like 2 years on, 3 years off, you know? And so it was in the middle of that off period. And I just said to her, I said, well, listen, if you ever go back to that Manson gig, you know, keep me in mind if for any reason they need a drummer, And she was like, sure, for sure. She's like, it's a pretty tight knit camp. And, Ginger had been kind of doing the gig on and off for so many years. So she said, that's slim. And so New York Dolls end. And I'm sitting on my couch, and it's like literally like the day after Christmas, which is like in LA, right? Even now it's just like dead duck. Like, yeah, we're COVID and I'm hiding out and being super careful. Yeah. But there's nothing to do anyway. In LA, December, January, February, usually it's just everything stops. Other than NAMM in January, there's no action, It's just Hollywood. That's how it is. In acting, everything stops. So I'm not expecting a call, and I get a call on the 26th. Manson, the Dolls ended on Halloween. Or no, we did. Yeah, I think Dolls ended on Halloween. So I'm just like, looking for a new gig. And I get a call the day after Christmas, and it's from the guitarist who had worked with him before, who is now out of the band.
Right.
But he reached out and he said, hey, just heard that Manson had a new drummer for this tour, some young dude, and he didn't cut it. He's out. They're looking for a drummer. And it was like, holy shit. So I immediately text my friend Tracy, who's was supposed to be, and I literally write her, I said, hey, let me know what you're thinking. She was like, already put your name in the hat with the manager. She wrote me literally right back. Yeah. So this was like happening. And it's like no man's land the day after Christmas, like so weird. And so I reached out to the manager, and next thing you know, he's like, yeah, okay. And I'd been learning live versions on YouTube because, of recent versions. So I know what the live shit is. So if I can get in there, but I don't have a list of songs or anything yet. I'm just kind of now talking to the manager. And, we're back and forth. He's cool. He's actually one of the best managers in the business, Tony Sula. And he calls me, and, again, I'm hanging out. This is like maybe the next day or 2 days later. And he said, hey, he'll see you tonight. They have to do an audition. They have a setup. You have to bring your drums and bring an iPhone or an iPod. We're going to have you play along just to these tracks, the recorded versions. Yeah. So, and it gives me like 6 tunes, and it's like, Beautiful People, Dope Show, classic shit. And then maybe a couple others, and maybe even a new song, but I don't know. He had the new record, Born Villain, was just about to come out. But I don't think there was any new songs, but I had to learn like 5 or 6 tunes. And of course they're off the iPod. So the recorded versions. So now I have to relearn these songs because they're not the extended or shortened versions I had been learning. Yeah. And I have like 4 hours to do it. I have to figure out what to wear. I literally have to take an entire drum set and throw it in my truck. I didn't even take the cymbals off the stands. I had so little time because I had to learn all these tunes. There were a couple of tunes I had never learned. And I race in there. I get there at like 8 o'clock, and Twiggy's there. And the coolest thing that I think is worth noting to like maybe the dudes who are listening is going back to the college shit, is that Fred, the bass player who was doing the gig, Twiggy, was playing guitar now. So Fred, his buddy, was playing bass and was on the record, and the record's in the can. Chris Vrenna was co-producing from 9 Inch Nails, the drummer, but he had programmed all the drums, which all the drums on Manson records are programmed, if you don't know that. Yeah. So even though they don't sound like it, they are, and have been for, the last 8-10 records. Maybe Gil Sharon played some stuff recently, but because that's different Manson era, but all the real big Manson shit is programmed. And Vrenna did that, but then was like, I'm out. I've had enough. I'm out. And then they got this other drummer, and now here, and he didn't work out. And now here I am. And so Fred, the bass player, said, Manson was at his house. He's like, who is this guy anyway? We're going to hear. Who is he? He's, some session dude. And Fred's like, oh, he's really good. You should check it out. So Manson has a huge wall of like screen for TV. He's like obsessed with TV shit and YouTube. And so anyway, Fred clicks on a few different clips of me playing just to show him before they get in the car and come to the audition. And the first clip is maybe me doing like a Bonzo Bash playing Led Zeppelin. And he was like, okay, cool. And the next clip was like maybe a Cornell thing, live. He was like, okay. And then he was like, sounds good. And then he played him a snare drum solo I have on YouTube called Hands of Doom. Right. And when I started to do drum clinics, I thought, wouldn't it be cool to do a section where I play brushes? Mm-hmm. And then I also play this rudimental snare solo, which turned out to be like, it was a hit. People loved it, but it was a nightmare for me to perform that in a clinic setting because it's a bitch, and you're going from drum set and even brushes, and then all of a sudden you got, the stress, and like I'm throwing sticks in the air, and it's like not what you want to be doing in a drum clinic where there's very little room for error when all of it was just like, it was a horror show. But anyway, so I had a buddy who was a director, a great director who was in town. He said, hey, let's film something. I have a camera, I have an assistant. And I said, well, I'm working on the snare solo. He's like, cool. So if you watch the snare solo, I have like tendonitis that I got from playing tennis before Foreigner. So my arms were really screwed at the time. I'm fine now. Everything's fine. But at the time it was gnarly, and I'm doing like, multiple takes on this shit. And so anyway, it's like, and I just started working up the snare solo based on a snare solo I competed with in college when I was in drum corps in DCI that I hadn't played in years. So it's not where, you can see better versions of it later. But anyway, just as a disclaimer, if you're going to check it out, I think it's called either Rudimental or it's called Hands of Doom, and it's on my thing. Anyway, that's raw. You can find better versions that I ended up playing it later, but this is the very beginning. And Manson sees that and flips out. Oh, wow. Flips out. Fucking loves it. Freaks out, and just has Fred play him over and over again. So when I show up I'm at the audition, I set up my drums. Manson comes in, like 10 feet tall with like, heels, and he's got a cheeseburger in one hand and a glass of absinthe in the other. And he walks in and he says, he comes up and he's like, hey, what's up? It looks like it's Mr. Magic Hands or Mr. And he makes some comment to that snare drum thing. And he's like, dude, blew me away. He's like, I've never seen anything like that. I fucking love that. He's like, I hope you can play drum sets, as good today. Or, he's, being cheeky, but that broke the ice with Marilyn Manson, a rudimental snare drum solo. Like, think about that. And for all those dudes out there that are like, oh, I'm just doing drum set. And you just don't know where this shit's going to come from. And again, just like the magic tricks of brushes or something, someone sees that and goes like, that could set you apart from everybody doing this well now, And it did. It broke the ice. So I always say in any audition, which I've done loads of, you want to get, when that artist walks in the door, or when you walk in the door and the artist is there, in that first minute, you're already auditioning. Yeah. Before you hit a note. Yeah. Just how you put the cymbals on the stand, they're watching you, they're watching what you're wearing, how you walk. Whether you like it or not, it begins way before you hit a drum. Yeah. Obviously that's where the buck stops. But the fact, I always say, if you can spend 1 minute talking to the artist about anything, that is like an hour in audition time of like getting to know you. And that's a big part of it because they want to know you, but it's your job to introduce yourself without being like over it. It's all, every inch of it is an audition. It's like dating, and they're attracted to you or you're not the minute you see them come into the bar, like blind date, you're from those first conversations, you're going to get clues as to who this person is. Again, a relationship or this audition, blind dating, it's the same shit almost, you know what I mean? So all those things are coming to play. So the fact that I was able to kind of engage him playfully through this rudimental shit, is massive. It's huge. And that also for me makes it so now I can sit back and play comfortably because I've broken that ice. Right? Does that make sense? Yeah, so it was an incredible thing. And that's, and I'm playing on my kit, it was the New York Dolls kit with the New York Dolls head still on it, 26, 14, 16, I think, like a red sparkle mock Ludwig legacy kit. Yeah. And I'm playing, their lights, we're in production, full production room, they're like ready to work on this shit and the drummer got canned. So there's lights on, dim the lights, their light show going on, playing, and I'm alone. And they're sitting up on these risers in there on different levels. The manager's sitting there, Twiggy's sitting there, Manson with his burger and absinthe, and Fred, and that's, I think maybe his girlfriend or some other chick was there. That's it. And it's just like I'm in a fishbowl, just me playing. And it's like, turn on the first tune, fucking just playing along to Dope Show, and the first tune ends, and I think Manson like clapped or something, and then I do the second tune and I can see out of the corner of my eye he's standing up, kind of like rocking out, standing up. And by like the third tune, he's now over at the microphone, leaning on the microphone, kind of rocking out, watching me. And by the halfway through the fourth tune, he cuts me off and says, let's play. And he brings the dudes down, and we end up running through all the tunes together, which is always a good sign. Your goal is to try to get somebody to get up and plug their guitar in. If you're doing a good job, you're going to make somebody just, So that ended, and then he said, I've got this new record in the can. I think he was just excited about it, and he wanted to feel me out. He said, I really want you to hear it. I want you to check it out and see what you think. And I'm like, okay, cool. And he's like, sounded great. And he leaves. And then the manager's like, yeah, so he wants you to come to his house now down the street and have a drink and listen to he wants to play the record for you. I'm like, okay, like bizarre. So next thing you know, I'm drinking like a whiskey with him, and he has all these, total Manson classic shit. He's living in an apartment at the time. I don't know why, but this wild place, pretty big. And, of course, it's like a party kicks out, all these chicks show up, like, and it's just me and him in a room. They're all in the other room, and me and him in the room, literally listening to the whole record together, just the two of us. It was pretty wild, pretty incredible. And he would make comments about shit. And I remember there's one tune on there you can check out on Born Villain called Murderers Are Getting Prettier Every Day. And it's a really fast double bass thing. And he said, don't worry, that's all programmed. And Chris Verena was like, I'll never be able to play this. So he's like, don't worry, if you can't play it, I don't want your legs to get tired. He's like, I don't want you to have to, so you can, I don't want to get in the way of you chasing chicks after the gig. Some comment. And it's, it's fast. And I've been working up double bass right before that. I started experimenting with Cornell with a little bit of it. And I played double bass a little in high school, but never much. So when the Cornell gig ended, I went headlong into practicing double bass, stamina, and working on like Slayer tunes and shit, trying to really step it up, just like with brushes, just like another discipline. Like, I'm going to practice this, thank God, because then I get this gig. And literally I left the party at like 2, and I went literally right to my practice room, and I remembered that groove and started practicing. And I was like, if I'm going to get this gig, and I'm going to play that tune, no tracks, And so, I ended up, that's kind of how the audition went. And then he had like 2 other guys to hear, and I got the gig, and by New Year's Eve, which is crazy. So 26, so literally like 4 days later, I had the gig. I remember New Year's Eve, I was able to be like, I can't believe like it's not even New Year's and I have a new tour, and and it was incredible. It was a great experience,
That's an amazing audition, that, isn't it?
It was all real, and it happened in almost that, in the exam, not in that time. It was bizarre, but yeah, it was incredible. I really I can say I literally like have the full metal experience. And Twiggy is an incredible composer, guitarist, and metal aficionado since he was a baby, and never once did he turn around and go, "You're not cutting it with the fast double bass," because there's a lot of double bass in those tunes that you don't notice, or in B-sides or tunes. So there's quite a bit of double bass. But that Murderers tune, which I think is on my YouTube too, a performance of that, you can see, because we didn't play it very often, which was scary because he would usually only pull it out at the end of a set, and I never knew when it was going to come, so I had to be ready to play it. So there's a version on there, that you can kind of hear it, which is fun. And I had to do, our first concert was Soundwave in Australia, our first tour, and literally it's like, it's a who's who. It's like Vinnie Paul with Hell Yeah, Joey Jordison with Slipknot, Jason Bittner. The list goes on and on of like metal,
some heavyweights,
yeah. And I'm literally playing, and they're watching all this shit, and I'm having to perform, for these gods of double bass. And for me, it was amazing. Before we play, I could walk around and sit right behind and watch each guy do it differently, and really watch how their feet will work. It was a great experience for me to, when I'm on gigs like that, I'm learning still.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? They don't realize that I'm playing this metal stuff, but I'm literally watching them. It's like I learned so much from that. And then we ended up touring South America with, I think, one of the funniest tours ever, which, I think I posted, like, our tour will beat up your tour, but I think it was Kiss, Slayer, Manson, Mastodon.
Whoa, what a lineup.
Yeah, and that was a tour of South America for like 2 or 3 weeks, and so I got to go sit behind Lombardo, and I are buddies, and he lives here, and in some random way I kind of helped bring him to Ludwig, which is bizarre, but that happened. And so he was so excited to show me his drum set that he loved this Pistolite Ludwig kit. And so I would, of course, be on the side stage. And the first night we played, because we were just kind of homies and had this kind of connection, I'm on the side of the stage, and his tech comes and grabs me and brings me over and sits me down in a chair that they've designated like a throne. And next to it is a little thing with like a like a freshly poured Guinness and like a couple cigarettes if I, whatever. It was like I had my own little viewing station about 6 feet behind Dave Lombardo.
Wow.
And that every time I sat there, they would come grab me and they would set that up for me every night. It was the most, words can't describe. And I didn't videotape much of it. I should have, but I do have clips of it, but I just wanted to just kind of enjoy it. Yeah. And it was amazing how Dave would do some crazy shit, just turn around and just look at me and be like, ready? Are you ready? Because it's going to get ready. And, go to the next section. It was just like you've never seen anything like that in your life. But talk about like incredible honor, but also just an incredible experience of like, just like, it's like seeing Buddy Rich from behind for 2 weeks. It's like no one will ever play like that dude ever again, either of those guys, and so it was just hilarious and ridiculous to be in that position, so that was, but I guess the point I'm making is that I was able to kind of just like fake it till you make it, you know what I mean? And luckily I'd been practicing that discipline of the double bass shit before I got that Manson gig. If I hadn't, I'd never been able to pull that off. You know what I'm saying? So again, it just goes to being like prepared for anything. And if you don't feel like you got some downtime, what else could you, what other area in your playing is lacking, and so anyway, that was an incredible musical experience to get to do all that and have on YouTube. And I did eventually get cameras for Manson behind me where I have like loads of great footage of just the show from behind with him like screaming and smashing my drums and shit. It's all in this videos, so I'm going to post that. I never post anything like that until I'm been done with the gig for a while. Yeah. But someday I'm going to post all that shit, each one separately, so you can see what it's like and the show and how insane it was. Cause it was like war, it was a battle. Every show was just chaos, like he thrives on chaos. And so that show is like war, and my job is to keep it, no matter what shit's flying by you or, him changing it up or forgetting the words, the same section every night. You got to make sure you stay the course. If he goes to the wrong section, I have to try to bring them back. It's a bitch, is he in character all the time? Is that Marilyn Manson? Does he? Yeah, it is. There's no character. Yeah, that's him. Everybody asks that question, which I think is funny, but I guess he's compelling enough that people could think that can't be how he is all the time, but he is. Yeah. It's for real. And honestly, the shit that would happen backstage was way more harrowing than any shit you see him do in public. You know what I mean? So you can only imagine just how crazy shit can get at like 3 a.m. on a tour bus flying down the highway or, backstage after a show. I mean, the thriving on chaos is real. So if the show went too well, then it's time to like break a bunch of shit. You know what I mean? Because there wasn't enough chaos in his day. And you're just kind of like, the worst part about it is I wasn't the scapegoat or the punching bag. There was another dude in the band that got that, like Ginger did before me. But the worst part was just being around people who didn't realize what they were walking into. Yeah. Your average staff, the woman in catering who's going to come up and decide she's going to talk to him about something or tell him that her daughter is a big fan. Yeah. They have no idea what's coming their way. Or the manager who brings his little like 13-year-old daughter to the rehearsal and goes up to him it's like you have no idea what you're walking into. The hell, like you'll never be able to erase the words that came out of his mouth to your daughter ever. You're never going to be able to erase what he's showing her on his phone. Yeah. Like those moments were just like, cause you just knew it was coming. And I'm used to it. I'm kind of galvanized. I mean, it definitely changes you, when you're around someone that's that full on, it's like his sensationalist kind of like over the top, I don't know, alarming reactions. People aren't used to humans acting that way. We get just, any kind of normalcy or, cordial, it's the exact opposite of what you could possibly do in that situation. So the awkwardness, the off-putting, the unbelievable shit that would come out of his mouth to these people who had no idea. It was just like, that was the hardest thing. Yeah. Cause it was real. And I saw him recently and it was great. to see him, and it was really wonderful. I love the dude. I really do. He's great, and I do think he's an incredible artist.
Yeah.
He's constantly, the thing about him is, as crazy as his all the sideshow shit is, it's offset by the fact that guy right now, I guarantee you, it's like noon, like 1 o'clock in LA. He's working on something creative, always, whether it be film, music. So he's got to get there. He's an original, just like Cornell. These guys are legends. And I for me, I got the gig. I said, whatever happens to myself, on this gig, I'm going to stay on the bull. I'm going to, no matter how hard it tries to, I'm going to ride this out. I'm not going to get fired, and I'm not going to quit. And it was brutal. I don't know many friends of mine who would have stuck it out, but I have to say, when it ended, we all had a group hug, the guys in the band, like we knew we made it, and the fact that I can see him, and it's like we're homies, and he's, introducing me to these people that, he's working with, and in this dressing room at a charity thing, I saw him, and I just happened to walk up to hang with Cheap Trick, my buddies in Cheap Trick, and Manson, he was like, said my name, or his girlfriend was looking out the door of their dressing room, and she said my name, and he like came out and grabbed me and pulled me in the room, and it was just, and the manager Tony was there, and it's like, it was a great experience, even though it was hellish. You know what I mean? I stayed on the bull, and we made some great music, and the chaos is something that I don't think I'll ever have that experience again. So it's truly like what it would probably be like on tour with like Aerosmith in 1977, or the excesses and the chaos and the just shit show. You just can't get away with that anymore, and I got right in that. So that was a cool, another box to check off, not to mention the playing, so with the highest level.
You've gone from one of the most insane, crazy gigs to your current gig, which I'm sure is slightly more sedate, but with another incredible voice, instantly recognizable, with Cher, of course.
Yeah. I mean, honestly, to me, it's just as crazy as Manson or insane, just in that she's just so larger than life and just, over the top. But, obviously it's a different gig, but to me, it's just as, it's of all the gigs I've done, probably the most awestruck every night on stage to play with her. And I would say, like, it's hard to describe, but I've been very lucky in that, we have these great high quality in-ear monitors now that we can, so you hear this impeccable sound, it's just gotten to another level. There isn't a shitty sound man. There isn't a shitty sound system. What you hear in your ears on all the gigs I do now at this level is just the most incredible quality. It's like the best record ever, and, touring with Cornell, it was like that voice that you would hear so intimately. It was like a lion, or just like an animal that you rarely see in the wild. There's only, one of them, and him. And when you hear that, it was like a drug.
Yeah.
So I would literally have to like listen to Soundgarden, records in between, or in my car, or just to, when we were off for a month or two, just to kind of, it's like a drug I craved. And she's the same. When you hear her voice, there's only one animal that sounds like that in the world, in the wild. You know what I mean? Yeah. And it never gets old. It's never a moment where I'm not just like on that stage, just sizzling from this incredible feeling of playing with this level of, and she never isn't just absolutely staggering. Her performance is just incredible. Not to mention the whole band. It's just the highest level octane of anyone I've ever played with. And I have to say, like, up until this gig, I've had so many great gigs and I've been so lucky, but you have a certain level where you hope you can get to, where eventually maybe you're like, okay, I've done it. You know what I mean? And although I could probably have said that 10 years ago, this gig to me is where it's like, okay, everything after this is gravy. You know what I mean? Yeah. The bell has been rung after this. Nothing will touch this. No, if there was any higher a mountain that you could, I've crossed it with her. You know what I mean? So to me, and to have done it for 3 years with her has been just like the biggest honor for me of any gig I've done, and we've talked about some pretty crazy gigs, but she is without question the top of the heap. You know what I mean? And she's just so classy, so cool. You know, we kind of do a huddle before we go, and we all hold hands, the dancers and the band.
Yeah.
And numerous times I'll just realize I'm like holding her hand before we go on stage. And she's always saying, she's just in classic, you know, every word out of her mouth is either super encouraging or sassy as hell. You know what I mean? And it's usually a combination of both. Super inspiring and then just completely dismissal, like, you know, it's all one big party, you know, and you know, just so inspiring on so many levels, you know. So, and again, it's the people she surrounds herself with, the band, the dancers, the crew, the management. It is the highest high. It's like, if there's a way to do it right, that's it, you know. And sadly, most people don't figure that out. You know what I mean? You have a great tour, but the tour manager's just a piece of shit. You know what I mean? Or it's a great tour, but you know what I mean? It's like, just, there's always somebody screwing something up. That's great, you know? And you're just like, God, if only that dude, what, you know? And there's none of that in her crew or her, you know, cast. It's just A-list, smiles, good vibes. I can't say enough, really. You know?
Great
it's
songs.
like that.
Great songs, a great catalogue of songs as well.
Beyond. And great drum, you know, it's all Hal Blaine or Frank Capp, you know, these classic LA icons, or just, you know, that's what I'm, you know, or Porcaro, you know.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, there's one of my favorite records is a record called Stars that I think is easily her best record. It doesn't have any hits on it, and there's a bunch of covers. She does like a Neil Young tune, and I think it's like 76, 77. And the drummers on it are literally like, it's like Jeff Porcaro, Frankie, or Gary Malaber, who is also one of my favorite. You know, Gary Malaber is on all the Steve Miller shit and still killing it. Lives down the street. He's still, you know, he's like on every record. Who else? I mean, it's amazing. I mean, the dudes. I think Harvey Mason, Jim Keltner, and I think Jim Gordon. Those are the drummers on this one record. Just like, you know, like literally a who's who. Those are the dudes. So yeah, to get to follow in those footsteps, and yeah, it's just nuts, you know. And to get to work in Vegas has been really cool. I mean, we toured the world, you know, but to get to work in Vegas for me has always been a dream, you know, like to have that, like Ronnie Tutt when you see him with Elvis, and that would be cool. And Vegas is really cool now, and you know, it's just so fun. I basically it's kind of been a home away from home for me. And we'll do like 3 weeks at a time. And it's like, I'm playing this huge Vegas, you know, theater, and, you know, we're coming in, Aerosmith's leaving, and they're, you know, we're coming in, and then we're leaving, and, you know, Lady Gaga's coming. You know, it's just like, it's a cool time to be in Vegas, but I'm in Vegas with the chick who wrote the book.
Yeah.
You know, Frank's gone. Dean Martin's gone. Barry Manilow's still there. There are a few cats left. Elvis has left the building, but she wrote that book too. She was there when all those guys were there in the 70s, and she was a little girl, and she brought rock and roll and women to that strip. And now, you know, here's a victory lap, and to be able to be on that, you know, the history, to be able to be part of that with her, again, is no description. I can see, you know what I mean? So for me, that was a dream. I always had to get to do that too. Obviously, it's amazing to get to play like these tours, and every show is an event, because people know this is probably it. So there's not one seat to play arenas. And I can have to say, like, for younger guys watching, or if you haven't played an arena, generally, you know, with huge bands, you're playing arenas, but there's salt and pepper of seats when you get to the top. It's okay. That's how they book them. There's still, everybody's making piles of money. With her, there's never one empty seat. Now, at the highest high, there's not an empty seat. And whoever they are at the top are freaking out as much as the people on the bottom, because this is it, you know? So it's an event, you know what I mean? You're not just playing a show. It's like a service, you know? It's like a religious experience for these people who are coming to pray to this God. It's just, and she just handles it so well, you know? It's like, you couldn't be cooler to your fans. You know, I watch her, you know, it's remarkable, really. So to be a part of it is just like the biggest honor, you know. And if we never play another gig, I know we will probably, but if I never did, I'm good, you know, with her. If she's like, I'm out, or, you know, for whatever reason, I end up having to do something else. 3 years of that was, you know, I would love to be able to be at that last show, you know, to be there. But, you know, we luckily did all of Australia. We did Europe for 2 months. We did 2 nights, sold out at the O2, and just so cool to get to do that with her. So, given all this chaos now with touring, I'm just so thankful that we were literally at this time, we were in Europe last year, I think maybe we came back into a month in the States. We'd just gotten back, but we were literally in Europe last year at this time for 2 months. So like, so glad we did that before all this stuff happened,
And you mentioned Ronnie Tutt before. Now you've got a kit that will rival his with the double bass and all of the concert toms. And where did that come from? That's a monster.
It's kind of ridiculous. It's funny, man. When that thing first came out, it's like funny. Like when I first got that kit, like I was literally, when I'd show up at like a hang in LA with drummers or to see a show or something, it was like, the kit had eclipsed me. You know what I mean? Like all anybody wanted to know about was the drum set, which is great. A couple of magazine articles just where they want to interview me about the drums, which I think is awesome. But yeah, I just, I've always loved Ludwig. My first kit was a little Ludwig kit. My dad got me from a dude who went to Vietnam and never came back, and they sold it from the attic, and I got this beautiful 60s 2012-14 blue sparkle with an acrylite. That was my first kit, like luckiest dude in the world. I played that all through high school, and got back with Ludwig maybe 15 years ago full time. But all through the 90s, I played vintage, Vista Light and shit, Anyway, so of course that Ludwig catalog when I was very little, that came out when I was like 10, and with the Octoplus and that most famous Ludwig catalog. If you don't know it, I think came out 79, 80. Yeah. If you can ever find one, you just have to understand, if you're younger than me, or the generation that got that catalog, how earth-shattering it was. If you, to the viewers, like, check it out. But like, there was like photograph with like colors or lightning. It was just like it's to this day the best catalog anybody will say. So there's this Octoplus kit that came out, and it was literally, speaking of like wild endangered species, it was like a rare thing. And occasionally, like, you would see one in the wild, like somebody would have invested and bought one in a cover band, and I would just be like, holy shit. It'd be like seeing like a zebra or something in upstate New York. It was just like, it was like this incredible rare being, this Octoplus. It was like, it couldn't be real. You can't actually buy those, so I just thought, God, wouldn't it be amazing? And that came from, Hal Blaine had designed a kit where at sessions where he could wheel it in with all these concert toms, so that he never needed to ask for anything else. He would just have it all right there. Yeah. Very famous. They had 2 kits made, of basically Octoplus, a little smaller than an Octoplus, which is 8 concert toms and then 1 or 2 floor toms, 2 bass drums. And so he used that on all those, on Half Breed, all those fills. And a lot of those fills that Hal Blaine did were those very simple, those are the fills on these records. And I was realizing I brought concert toms out, 8 and a 10, and then they had a 13, 16, 18, 24. And it was like, and in the venues, we went to Australia with that kit, and the big, huge venues, when I'd sit up and listen to my drum tech hitting him, I just thought, man, the concert tom sounds so much better and more exciting in this setting of arena. Yeah. I thought, what if I had a whole kit? It would just be so much easier to emulate these classic drum parts, which many of them were recorded on this massive Hal Blaine kit. And so I reached out to Ludwig and said, hey, would this be something that's possible? And it was actually thanks to Uli Salazar from Ludwig. He is a huge Ludwig fanatic. And we realized that Ludwig had now that those concert toms had changed in size, the relativity, they were different over the years. So he had to go back and have each drum made perfectly the spec of the Octoplus, with the lugs, the badges. So we just did it. So literally, if you look at the kit, it literally looks like 1979. It's no different.
It's a one-off kit.
It is just one. Wow. And I had it made in white, Cortex, just to kind of, be neutral on the stage. And then came the process of me talking to the sound man, the head of production, the drum tech. I had to get cases made. Is this going to work? Do we have enough channels? Are you going to hate me to have to set this kit up every night? Can we work something out? And luckily, everybody with a little bit, was more like real estate. You have this much room. Can you do it in this much room? And I'm like, I think I can. And to be honest, the kit sets up like a dream. My tech says it's easier than the other kit, And luckily I talked with Mike Berg, the great Mike Berg from Humesenberg, and we came up with an idea of how to do this. And we basically had these tubes for congas, and they put in dividers in each one. So it'd be concert tom, divider, concert tom, divider. And so we have 2 tubes that wheel all the toms. So my tech is like, dude, this is so much easier. I have to say, I've never sat behind it where it wasn't completely comfortable.
Yeah.
I had to push the hi-hat. I had to bring my hi-hat in a little bit. And to be disclaimer, I've toured with a double bass kit with Smashmouth in the past, and I only use a double pedal, one bass drum. Nobody wants 2 bass drums. No sound man wants to deal with that. Just, it's just not how it is anymore. Yeah. But I still play with 2 bass drums because it's awesome, you know? So on this, I have 1 double pedal. So because of that, I'm able to move the hi-hat into where it's in a comfort zone. Yeah. Another thing for readers, which I think, or for listeners, is that's interesting, is I put my double pedal on the left of my hi-hat because I got the double bass later. So instead of having inside, which is only a habit from having 2 bass drums, there's no need to do that. So if you're starting double bass, try it, because then your hi-hat's closer to you instead of being extended. It makes no sense if you're a new double bass player to not put your double pedal to the left. Yeah. You know? Anyway, so that makes it much easier to accommodate. And literally I just pushed the 8 and 10 tom out just a little, so it's kind of just a little bit like it's a little bit like this. And it's amazing, man. It's so easy to play. The sound, man, the production, loved how it looked. The music director and the rest of the band were like, dude, it sounds incredible. And the recording, it was a success. And it was one of those risks. And of course I took the sound man out to a really nice, expensive dinner. I got it, but it worked and it fit in the space. And I got to say, it's just like, it's a joy to play. And obviously she does a 15-minute monologue every night. And during that, we just chill. And I just sit there and I just look at this kid. It's like, I'm like a kid in a candy store. I'm like, I cannot believe how gorgeous. And the sound is, I took a little bit of a learning curve, in the 70s, they were all tuned super low. I had to find the right drum heads. I'm using Remo, vintage clear Emperors, which give the best product sound and durability. And people don't realize, like, not many people use concert toms anymore, but they're very easy to tune. You have one head. So from back, it's a breeze. You can tell if it's out immediately. You can tell if a lug is out, it's nothing to it, So it's made his life easier. And, we just found from bigger venues, we would tune them tighter. And from smaller venues, we would loosen them a little because we could get away with it, but the sound would drop it. Man, I go out in the sound check and hear that thing being played. It's just, it's the dream arena gig, Cool. And so, it's just super, super fun, so, but it's ridiculous. It really has a life of its own. And I said, like, you guys should do a new catalog and put this kid in there and like take it to NAMM, remake the Octoplus, get them out there you can order one. Yeah, of course. Now a SKU number, they told me you can order an Octoplus just like this one again. You can do that. So if you want an Octoplus, you can do it. But anyway, it's ridiculous. But I'm at the point where, like, why the fuck not? But really, it really comes down to one thing, and the one thing is the sound. How can I get that sound for Half Breed or those famous runs and Gypsies, Tramps and Thieves, and like Hal Blaine, there's parts of it where are very orchestral, where I'll just reach over on a 6-inch tom and do a like a 7-stroke roll for this orchestral part, or it's like it's very, I have mallets for the big toms for this like timpani and in like what's the ABBA tune, Fernando, these gong hits, it's like super gongy, huge, almost tympanic sound that I have full spectrum. And that gig requires a full, I also play a full Roland TD-50 kit as well, for all the dance tunes. So it's gotten to the point where it's like, it's Neil Peart-esque, which is kind of ridiculous, but the show is more than just a rock show. It's like a show. It's a performance. So there's, it requires that kind of, or it allows that kind of spectrum, which is super fun. So, wow. Yeah.
Wow. Amazing. Look, Jason, I've taken up far more of your time than I said I would.
All good, man.
It's gone by in a flash, trust me. Absolutely fascinating. And I really appreciate you, giving your time so generously.
Absolutely, man. Say hey to Wales for me. I love it there. I've always loved coming through there. It's just always a great time. And I miss England, it's like one of my absolute favorite places to be. I just love it. It's like just it's like a home away from home. So, yeah, love it. So
Yeah.
thanks for having me.
Appreciate it, and I'm sure everyone who watches will appreciate it as well. So thank you very much. It's just, fantastic. So
Absolutely. And if anybody I'm at jasonsutter.com. You can reach out if you are looking to do any, anything or have any questions on anything, feel free. If I can, I'll reach out and say, yo. And like I said, check out Drumhead Live. It's streaming right now, and it's pretty cool little thing to be a part of. I'm pretty stoked. So if you're looking for a little bit of inspiration, it definitely inspired me. So hopefully that could, if you don't know what I'm about, you can check it out a little bit there too and see some of the playing. So
you're a gentleman. Thank you very much, Jason.
Cheers. Thanks for having me, man.
Okay, mate. See you soon.
Awesome.
Bye-bye.
All right.